Hey guys, tonight we wake not in your cozy bed with a lavender candle burning and a playlist of soft piano loops, but in a frigid Viking longhouse just before dawn, where your breath fogs the air and your blanket smells faintly of goat. You're not the warrior. You're not the jarl. You're not even the jarl's third cousin, twice removed, who sometimes gets to serve mead. No, tonight. You're the toilet cleaner. You probably won't survive this. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Drop your location and local time in the comments. I always love seeing where and when you're listening from. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge out into the darkness, rubbing sleep from your eyes and praying to Thor that no one used the pit latrine during the night feast. Your job? Clean the longhouse toilet, or, to be precise, the communal waste trench dug out behind the main structure, a few meters from the cook fire where everyone will be preparing breakfast in, oh, half an hour. You'd think they would dig it farther away. You'd be wrong. The trench is frozen solid in places, but not in all places. Let's just say some of it still steams. You carry your tools, a sturdy wooden paddle, a hooked stick, and a bucket you pray will hold. There's no glamour here, only grime. You start scraping. This job actually mattered more than you'd expect. Viking hygiene wasn't perfect, but they were cleaner than many of their medieval counterparts. Latrines were essential to public health and longhouse survival. Someone had to maintain them, or else disease spread, and nobody wanted to be remembered as the family that died of poo. The stench curls into your nose despite the cold. It's not just human waste. There are bones, fish, scraps, something that might have once been turnip. You find a rat. You have a moment. The rat wins. This role, while disgusting, gave you access to surprising power. You overheard everything: late-night whispers, midnight confessions, arguments about who really owned that axe. Cleaners were often invisible, and invisible people hear everything. In some Icelandic sagas, the lowest status workers were granted special status during assemblies. They were, after all, the ones who knew all the dirt, literally and figuratively. Historians still argue whether this reflects reality or just poetic license, but the idea of toilet workers as accidental power brokers is too delicious to ignore. You pause to warm your hands over a nearby dung fire. It's not ideal, but it's warm. You'll take it. By the time the first child sleepily wanders outside, you've already cleared half the trench, poured the bucket into the compost heap, and returned to your scraping. That compost, by the way, valuable. It fertilized the barley that brewed the ale that gave people courage to live like this. Your work, smelly, humble, backbreaking, was part of the system. Without you, the village didn't function. And hey, at least you don't have to fight berserkers or clean up after them. Not today. You find something strange in the pit, what looks like a tiny carved wooden horse. You pocket it. A child must have dropped it. You might return it, or maybe keep it. A treasure of the latrine. As the sun starts to rise over the icy fields, the smell doesn't fade, but the light at least makes the steam look mystical. Someone hands you a bowl of hot broth and claps you on the shoulder. Good work. They grunt. It's the only compliment you'll get all day, maybe all year, but there's a strange comfort in the rhythm of the job. Clean, Dump, stir ash, repeat. It's work you can count on, work that no one wants, but everyone needs. And so, you keep scraping, humming a little tune to yourself about how one day, maybe, you'll get promoted, maybe to rat catcher. You blink the dung smoke from your eyes, trade your shovel for a stale crust of bread, and take your usual seat near the hearth, far enough to be ignored, close enough to stay warm. But you won't get to sit long, because today you're putting on a fur-trimmed cloak, grabbing a carved staff, and transforming into your other job, professional insult poet. Yes, that's a real thing. Vikings called it flighting, a formal poetic battle of insults, where sharp tongues replace sharp swords. You're not just a jester, you're a weapon, hired by nobles to deliver devastating verses at feasts, funerals, or legal disputes. And if your rhyme is clever enough, you can humiliate your target into backing down or exploding in rage, which sometimes gets you a bonus. You stand before a crowd gathered in the smoky hall. The air is thick with sweat, roasting mutton, and the tension of unresolved blood feuds. The jarl gestures. That's your cue. You step forward and begin. Your voice is calm. Your verse, vicious. You call someone's beard limp, their ancestors cowardly, their last raid a fishing trip with extra crying. The crowd erupts. You barely suppress a grin. This isn't just comedy, it's strategy. In a world where honor is everything, a public, poetic beatdown can do more damage than a blade. And unlike duels, which can end in death and awkward cleanup, flighting is relatively safe. Usually, in one saga, a man loses a flighting battle and promptly challenges his opponent to a duel, then loses that too. Double embarrassment. Historians still argue whether flighting was a sanctioned legal practice or just spicy entertainment, but it clearly had cultural weight. There's a hierarchy to these insults. You must rhyme. You must be clever. You cannot simply shout. You smell like bad fish. That's amateur hour. Instead, you craft something like, your shield's so thin, I used it to fan the stew, and your blade's so dull, it couldn't part goat poo. You bow. The crowd whoops. Someone throws a chicken leg. You dodge. These performances were often part of larger assemblies, things where disputes were settled and laws recited. Your job might include slandering someone on behalf of your patron, turning public opinion before the votes are cast. You're both entertainer and political influencer, centuries before TikTok. Of course, the risk is real. Go too far with the wrong person, and you could find yourself tarred, exiled, or skewered. So you choose your words and your enemies wisely. There's a moment mid-performance when you lock eyes with your opponent. He grins. You grin. This is mutual war. He retorts with a verse about your mother and an unfortunate incident with a goose. The hall roars. You lose that round. But your comeback lands like thunder. I'd rather be the goose than the fool who chased it. You fought the wind last night and still misplaced it. People stamp their feet. The jarl nearly spills his mead laughing. You've won the night. Later, as you wipe spit-roasted grease from your hands and count the silver slipped into your pouch, you reflect. Not many people get paid to be mean. Fewer get applause for it, and fewer still make it out without a black eye. You do sometimes wonder what your parents would have thought of this career path. But then again, your mother once insulted an entire wedding party with nothing but a raised eyebrow, so maybe it runs in the family. The fire dims. A drunk Viking snores nearby, drooling onto your boot. You lean back, full of warmth, silver, and smug satisfaction. You may not be a warrior, but you've defeated someone just as publicly, and no blood was spilled, just pride. And that, in the Viking world, is priceless. Your throat still echoes with rhyme, but your next job couldn't be less poetic. You trade your insult staff for a ladle and a ragged fur wrap, because today you're not performing, you're stewing in tar. Welcome to your shift as the ship tar stirrer. You start before dawn, as usual. The others are still dozing in the longhouse, their snores mingling with the soft drip of melting frost. But you're already outside, crouched by a blackened iron cauldron filled with bubbling pine tar. The fumes hit you first. They always do. Think burnt sugar, old socks, and death by tree sap. Your job is simple. Keep the tar from catching fire. That means stirring constantly, not too fast, not too slow, using a long-handled paddle carved from ash wood, too hot, and it'll boil over and explode, too cold, and it'll harden like treacle in winter. You've lost 3 paddles this month and your eyebrows are, well, let's just say they're patchy. Tar was essential to Viking life, especially shipbuilding. It waterproofed the hulls of longships, preserved wooden planks, and even sealed roof beams against the damp. Without tar, your ships would sink, your homes would rot, and your neighbors would mutter curses under their breath while holding leaky buckets. What most people forget is how dangerous tar making actually was. The process involves simmering pine resin for hours in a smoky pit, controlling fire with guesswork and wet moss. If you inhale too deeply, dizziness, too close to the flames, blisters. Some sagas mention people falling into the tar pits, though historians still argue whether those stories were metaphorical warnings or just very unfortunate Tuesdays. You stir and stir. The steam clings to your face. Your clothes reek. You'll never get the smell out. Tar gets into your hair, your boots, even your dreams. You once dreamed of drowning in it, which isn't far off from real life. But here's the kicker. This job gives you status, because without you, no one sails. And sailing is everything. Trade, war, exploration. It all depends on seaworthy ships. So when a proud warrior smirks at your blackened hands, you can smirk back, knowing that his fancy longboat would crumble like wet bread without your gooey genius. You glance up as a young apprentice approaches, holding a fresh bundle of pine logs. He's late. You scowl just enough to scare him, then toss a wet moss clump onto the fire to cool it a little. It hisses like an angry snake. Some tar workers became specialists, known in certain regions as Cherebrennera, tar burners. Their knowledge was passed down carefully, sometimes guarded like sacred recipes. The best ones knew when to tap the pine trees, how to stack the logs in a kiln-like trench, and exactly how much heat to keep the resin flowing. You, of course, are still learning. Last week, your batch scorched and left everyone slipping on sticky soot for days. As you scrape a crust of hardened tar from the rim, you imagine a future where you're not just the stirrer, but the master of the pit, maybe even with your own apprentice to scold properly. A shout rings out from the docks. Another ship needs sealing. You sigh. That means hauling a fresh bucket down, slathering tar between the hull's boards while keeping your boots from sticking fast. The work is endless, but so is the sea. And every time a longship glides across the fjord, dark and gleaming, you feel a flicker of pride. Tar might ruin your clothes, your lungs, and your social life, but it's also what keeps the Viking world afloat, literally. And hey, at least you don't have to eat it. Well, unless you're unlucky enough to be the next section's unlucky soul. But we'll get to that. You rub your sticky fingers together, hoping the tar stains will pass for war paint. They won't, but it doesn't matter, because now you've washed your mouth out with mead and taken up a new and far more delicious post. Tonight, you're the ale taster on feast days. It's not all fun and foam. Mind you, your job might sound like every bard's dream, getting paid to drink, but this role is more about survival than celebration. Specifically, making sure no one else doesn't survive. You perch near the hearth where barrels of dark, foamy ale are lined up, tapped, and ladled into carved wooden cups, before any jarl or honored guest sips from the ceremonial horn. It comes to you? You take a generous mouthful? You swirl? You sniff? You swallow? And then you wait. If you're still standing after 10 minutes, it's probably safe. Yes, your job is essentially royal poison checker, but with a frothy twist. You're the beer buffer between ambition and assassination, and that's no joke. Viking feasts were political minefields. Families feuded, power shifted. All it took was one vial of nightshade in the barley mash to ruin everyone's evening and their lineage. Ale was the heart of Viking celebration, brewed from barley, sometimes flavored with juniper, honey, or bog myrtle. It was thick, sour, and strong. Not always filtered well, but hey, neither was the water. Drinking alcohol was often the safer bet. Historians still argue whether poisonings were genuinely frequent or exaggerated in the sagas for dramatic flair, but the mere fear was real enough to invent jobs like yours. And you take it seriously. After all, you like breathing. You raise a cup to your nose. This one smells off. Earthy. Like someone added mushrooms and regret. You sip. Slowly. It tingles. Not good. You discreetly hand it to the dog. The dog sniffs. Walks away. You log it as do not serve. Sometimes, your role overlaps with that of a brewer's apprentice. You're expected to know the difference between an innocent fermentation and something that could send a nobleman to Valhalla prematurely. You even keep a little spoon made of bone in your belt, your personal tasting ladle, custom carved, because style matters. You once rejected a barrel because it was too cloudy. The brewer called you a dung-tongued toad. 3 hours later, that barrel exploded. No one apologized, but you heard fewer toad jokes after that. Feast days are your most hectic. Dozens of barrels. Dozens of suspicious uncles whispering behind veils of mead steam. You drink more in 1 hour than a farmer drinks all week. Your cheeks flush, your ears buzz, and your boots get sloppy. But you must stay sharp. You're not here to get drunk. You're here to keep others from dying drunk. There's a moment every feast, right after you've cleared the ale, when you look out over the hall. The fire glows. The meat sizzles. The harper tunes his strings. You nod. It's safe. You did your job. Then someone hands you a horn of something homemade. You raise an eyebrow. It's birch sap wine, they say. Too cheerfully. You consider the risks. You smile politely. You sip. It tastes like punishment, but you're still alive. Congratulations. You've saved another feast. You've braved the dubious brews of ambitious cousins and overconfident herbalists. You may not be a warrior or a skald, but you are, undeniably, a hero of the digestive tract. And tomorrow morning, when everyone else wakes up with spinning heads and no memory of where their pants went, you'll already be prepping the next barrel. Because bad ale is one thing, but no ale, that's a crisis. The feast is over. You've survived the ale, barely. And while the warriors are still snoring in piles near the hearth, you're slipping out into the dawn mist with your next assignment. Today, you're the grave goods arranger. Now, don't let the name fool you, This isn't some cushy job fluffing pillows for the dearly departed. This is labor intensive, emotionally weird, and frankly, a little creepy. But someone has to do it, because when a Viking dies, they don't go alone. They go with stuff, and it's your job to make sure that stuff looks good. The dead deserve dignity, or at least symmetry. You arrive at the burial site, either a ship-shaped pit dug into the earth, or, if the deceased was particularly important, a real ship being dragged ashore. Today, it's the latter. A full boat burial. That means extra socks, extra ceremony, and extra heavy lifting. Your first task is placement. Weapons go on the right, jewelry and tools on the left. Animals, yes, actual animals, are arranged respectfully at the feet. The goats are already here. The horse is late. Typical. You hoist a chest onto the ship's wooden deck. Inside are the usual suspects: combs, a small silver mirror, an iron cauldron, and some impressively underwhelming shoes. You pause. These shoes again. Third time this month someone's been buried with these floppy, hand-stitched excuses for footwear. Historians still argue whether grave goods were chosen by personal request, family superstition, or just whatever hadn't been pawned yet. Either way, you do your best to make it look intentional. You smooth a wool cloak around the corpse's shoulders, tucking it in just so. This part always gets to you. There's something oddly intimate about dressing a warrior for the next world, especially when the last thing you said to him was, "No, you cannot duel the goose." You light incense, well, pungent herbs, and dried fish scales. It's not fragrant, but it hides the smell. Then, with practiced hands, you place a small gaming board beside the deceased. The rules are lost to time, but the gesture is clear. May your afterlife be entertaining. You're joined by a priestess, who murmurs a chant while throwing bones onto a cloth. She frowns. Bad omen. You rearrange the coins at the corpse's feet, just in case it helps. One quirky fact: in some graves, archaeologists have found nails driven through clothing, possibly to prevent the dead from rising. It's your job to decide whether this guy gets nailed down or sent off free range. You check the family's mood. No nails today. That's good. Easier on your conscience. There's a superstition among grave arrangers. If the ravens circle twice before the ship launches, the soul sails safely. If they don't, well, that's above your pay grade. You pause to tuck a carved wooden horse. Yes, the same kind you once found in the latrine, near the man's hands. Maybe it belonged to his child. Maybe it's just a toy. Either way, it feels right. You step back to admire your work. The corpse is peaceful. The goods are tidy. The goat still looks confused. But that's normal. With a final nod to the crew hauling the ship toward the waterline, you sling your empty sack over your shoulder and trudge home. You smell like smoke and leather and a little bit like existential dread, but there's a strange satisfaction in this role. You're not a warrior. You don't raid or boast or carve runes into enemy bones. But you send the dead off in style. You remind the living that someone still cares, even after the horns go silent and the grave is closed. And tonight, when someone raises a horn to the fallen, they'll be admiring your handiwork even if they don't realize it. You've seen death. You've dodged poison. You've rhymed a man into public shame. But today, your job is less dramatic, yet, somehow, even more awkward. Because today, you are an oath witness for hire. That's right. You're not here to testify, argue, or accuse. You're here to stand silently while other people swear they're not lying. And your ability to look very serious while doing absolutely nothing. That's your greatest asset. You arrive at the thing, the Viking legal assembly held in a windswept field or atop a flat hill. There's a rock for the speaker, a rough circle for the accused and accusers, and a lot of people pretending to understand laws they've only half heard. You, meanwhile, are in high demand. A man approaches you. He's wearing his nicest tunic and trying to look innocent. "I need a witness," he says, eyes twitching. "Goat theft case." You nod solemnly. In the Viking world, justice wasn't about lawyers and paperwork. It was about oaths, honor, and who you could get to publicly support your version of events. And sometimes, that support was incentivized. You don't lie. Of course. That would be bad. You just stand next to someone, as they say, "I swear I didn't take Bjorn's goat." And then you grunt and look dignified. Boom. That's an oath. Case nearly closed. Historians still argue whether these professional witnesses were officially sanctioned or more of a convenient gray area in Viking law. Some accounts suggest people would travel miles to hire someone with a trustworthy face. Yours? Very trustworthy, rugged, stoic, slightly bored. Perfect. You shift your weight as the goat theft trial begins. The accuser dramatically describes hoof prints, a trail of turnip peels, and a suspicious bleeding noise. You stay stone-faced. Then it's your client's turn. He puts his hand on a sacred object, often a Thor's hammer pendant, sometimes just a sacred rock, and swears he's innocent. You stand by his side, arms crossed. You don't nod. You don't smile. You simply exist. Later, someone thanks you, slips you a fish. You don't ask why. Your job isn't always about livestock. Sometimes it's about land boundaries, broken betrothals, or who gets to inherit the sheepdog. You've witnessed oaths over love spells, lost axes, and one particularly heated debate about a stolen spoon. There's a quiet power in this work. People trust you, or rather, they trust your ability to look unshakable while chaos swirls around you. Of course, there are risks. If your oath buddy is caught lying, you might share in the punishment. You've seen people exiled for perjury, their witnesses sent packing right alongside them. So you've developed a talent for sniffing out desperation. Desperate people are dangerous, or, at the very least, bad liars. You once walked away from a man whose story changed 3 times in 5 minutes. He called you a coward. Later that week, he was pelted with fish heads and forced to give up his sword. You call that good instincts. The legal system relies on reputation. That's why you keep your tunic clean and your beard combed. You may not be a priest or a chieftain, but when you stand beside someone, it matters. Your silence speaks volumes. There's a pause in the proceedings. Someone else waves you over. "Land dispute," they mutter. 3 cows at stake. You nod. You follow. Another day, another vow. As the sun sinks low and the crowd begins to thin, you sit on a rock with a crust of bread in your hand and your back to the sea. You've heard a dozen oaths, seen 5 fights nearly start, and avoided being spit on by a furious auntie. All in a day's work. You chew slowly. The wind picks up. Somewhere, a goat bleats. You decide to call it a win. You've stood in judgment's shadow, listening to men swear over stolen goats. But today, the air smells different, thicker, oilier, and somehow fishier, because now your hands are the color of old butter and your boots stick to the ground. You are the whale blubber slicer. Don't be fooled by the name. You're not gently preparing hors d'oeuvres for a sea-themed feast. You're elbow deep in slabs of marine fat, hacking through greasy flesh with a curved iron blade, while seabirds circle like predators. Welcome to coastal whaling season. You arrive at the beach before dawn, where a beached whale has been pulled up with ropes and levers by a dozen shouting men. The corpse lies bloated and stinking in the low tide, ribs like ship beams, tongue hanging out like it lost a drinking contest. You roll up your sleeves. Whale blubber is valuable, very valuable. It's rendered into oil for lamps, waterproofing, cooking, even medicine. But it doesn't harvest itself. That's your job. And it's less surgery, more wrestling match. First, you make long slits in the skin, peeling back thick sheets of blubber with a team of other slicers. The fat glistens in the morning sun, yellow-white and streaked with blood. You've learned to grip with your knees while pulling with your hands. It's an art, a disgusting, slippery art. The worst part isn't the smell, it's the noise, the squelch, that wet, sucking groan every time you lift a sheet of blubber from bone. You can feel it in your spine. You drop the slab onto a cart, where someone else will haul it to the rendering pits. You take a moment to stretch. A gull lands near your pile and dares to peck it. You hiss. The gull hisses back. You lose. Again. Some scholars suggest Viking communities engaged in opportunistic whaling, harvesting beached or trapped whales rather than active deep-sea hunting. But that doesn't make your job easier. Dead whale is still dead whale, heavy, slippery, and pungent. There's a fringe theory that Vikings used fermented whale oil for ritual purposes, an idea still debated. You once tried sniffing a sealed jar of old oil. Your left eye twitched for a week. Never again. Your tunic is ruined. Your boots are soaked in something that might have once been liver. But you keep working, because the sooner you finish, the sooner the whale's innards become something useful. Oil, soap, maybe even trade goods for a passing merchant ship. The men around you talk shop. Someone mentions that last year. A whale's stomach contained 8 fish hooks, a shoe sole, and what they swear was a gold earring. You raise an eyebrow. They nod solemnly. You decide to check this one's stomach later. Quietly. After hours of slicing, lifting, and occasionally falling face first into blubber, the whale is nearly stripped. You take a final moment to wipe your blade, lean against the rib cage, and watch the oil fires begin in the distance. The rendering crew is already stirring. The smell grows worse with heat, burnt fat, acrid smoke. You feel it seep into your pores. You'll smell like this for days, but in a way, it's a badge of honor, because when the long nights come and the sea freezes over, the oil you helped extract will light the halls, keep the hearths burning, and maybe even grease the gears of some poor fool's oath-taking ceremony. You, dear slicer, are disgusting, but essential, and maybe, just maybe, you'll find that gold earring. Your nose is still recovering from the whale blubber bonanza when you get a summons, loud, sharp, and unmistakable. It echoes across the valley, a deep, drawn-out bellow like someone yelling into a wooden bucket. That means it's your turn again. You grab your thickest cloak, clear your throat, and head to the hill. Today, you're the Law Rock Yeller. It sounds prestigious, and it is, sort of. You stand on a massive stone, usually worn smooth by 1,000 muddy boots, and you shout the law at a crowd of half-listening Vikings while trying not to cough up your lungs from the effort. Welcome to the thing again. But unlike the silent dignity of an oath witness, today your voice is the star. You're the human megaphone, the amplifier of justice, the town crier with frostbite. You climb onto the rock just as the gathering settles. The wind kicks up, threatening to steal your words. You plant your feet wide and bellow. Anyone caught moving a boundary stone will forfeit 2 goats and a chicken unless the stone was moved by a flood. Half the crowd nods. The other half is throwing fish bones at each other. Standard turnout. This role traces back to oral tradition. In Viking society, law wasn't written down, at least not at first. It was memorized, recited, passed through generations by trained speakers called law speakers or lugzogumen. You're not quite at law speaker level, but you're the lungs that carry the code. You've memorized over 50 provisions, from inheritance rights to acceptable duel etiquette. You can rattle off compensation amounts for cow theft, accidental axe wounds, or publicly calling someone a sheep kisser. There's a rhythm to it. The law is chanted, almost sung. That helps it stick, and keeps people from tuning out entirely. Your job is to pace it just right, too slow, and people fall asleep. Too fast, and someone might miss the part about what not to do with your neighbor's fence. Historians still argue whether these law recitations were strictly accurate or more performance-based. One fringe theory claims that some yellers added personal flair, raising pitch for dramatic effect or changing tone to mock unpopular edicts. You plead the 5th, or, in this case, the 7th clause of the second goat statute. There are perks to this gig. You get a decent cut of food at the gathering. People recognize your face. You've even been gifted a sheepskin cloak once, which you still wear on windy days like this. The downside? Your throat. Constant yelling on cold days leads to what healers call wind voice, a raspy, cracking condition fixed only with warm broth and a week of silence. Good luck with that when the next trial's tomorrow. You reach the end of the boundary laws and pause for breath. Someone claps. Someone else yawns. You clear your throat and launch into the livestock theft section. It involves many goats, one haunted pig, and a very specific clause about chickens crossing roads. You catch a glimmer of amusement in the crowd, probably at the haunted pig bit. You smile just little. That's the magic of the Law Rock. For one moment, even the poorest farmer and the richest chieftain are united in listening to you recite something absurd but binding. You wrap up the session with a dramatic flourish. And no man may claim land using a dead man's foot. Silence. Then a chuckle. You step down. Your voice is shredded, your lips cracked, but your heart is strangely full. You've spoken truth, or at least tradition. You've reminded people of their rights, their duties, and the penalties for fence-related crimes. And tomorrow, you'll probably be yelling again, with honey water and a thick scarf, Your voice is gone. Your throat feels like you gargled hot gravel, and your sheepskin cloak smells faintly of old stew and goat. So today, thankfully, you get a job that involves sitting down. Sort of. You are now the tooth ornament crafter. Yes, this is a real profession, my cha. And yes, it's exactly as weird as it sounds. You sit cross-legged by the fire, a small table of tools laid out in front of you, awls, tiny chisels, bone files, and a delicate pick made from antler. Around you lie heaps of raw materials, bear teeth, boar tusks, seal molars, and, once in a while, the occasional human incisor. You don't ask where those came from. Tooth ornaments were fashionable, a symbol of status, toughness, and, depending on the design, either mystical protection or a deep misunderstanding of dental hygiene. Warriors wore them as amulets, threaded onto necklaces or sewn into clothing. Some even had teeth carved and worn like charms from their own extractions. That's dedication. You inspect your current project, a polished wolf fang with a runic inscription halfway finished. The runes are for protection. Probably, they might also say something like, "Beware of rabbit." Depending on your spelling, you're still working on your orthography. Crafting these trinkets requires patience and precision. One slip, and you crack the enamel or slice your thumb. Again, you've got a dozen little scars from mistaking bone for stone. The work is slow, but there's an art to it. Some historians suggest these ornaments had spiritual significance. Others think they were just status symbols, bling before gold chains were a thing. You suspect the truth lies somewhere in between, especially when a warrior insists his necklace of bare molars helps him win duels. You nod and keep carving. Your mentor once told you, every tooth holds a story. Sometimes it's a lie. Carve it anyway. The more superstitious clients want specific carvings: Thor's hammer, serpent spirals, Valkyrie eyes. Others want nonsense that feels lucky, like 3 dots and a lightning squiggle. One woman requested her own initials carved into a fox tooth. You did it. She gave you 3 eggs and a song. Occasionally, you get requests for animal-to-human tooth swaps, where someone wants to wear a wolf's fang in their mouth to look more fearsome. You try to talk them out of it. Usually, your workshop smells of oil, ash, and old leather. You burn sage to purify the workspace, mostly because the smoke keeps flies away. A raven perches near the window. You glance at it. It stares. You whisper, "Not today, Odin," and go back to chiseling. Your fingers ache. Your back cracks when you lean forward. You drop a molar and spend 20 minutes crawling on hands and knees to find it in the rushes, but then you hold up the finished piece, a boar tusk etched with twin spirals, polished to a dull shine, and you nod. It's ugly. It's lumpy. It's perfect. One quirky find from a real Viking grave, a skeleton with drilled horizontal holes in their front teeth, thought to have held small decorations. Historians still argue if this was for ritual, fashion, or just some very early body modification trend. Either way, someone had to do the drilling. You wonder if that's your next gig. As the sun sets, a tall warrior enters your tent. He points at a saber tooth. "Make it look angry," he grunts. You ask, "Angry how?" He replies, "Like it wants revenge." You nod slowly. You are an artist, a dentist, a shaman, a jeweler, a magician of molars. And when your clients walk into battle, they do so with your teeth rattling on their chest, warding off fate, or at least sparking conversation. Your eyes are bleary from carving runes into tusks, your fingers stained with ash and oil. But the sun is rising again, and with it comes heat, hunger, and smoke. Not the cozy kind from a hearth fire. No, today's smoke is face melting, because today, you are the bread oven fire stoker. And in a Viking settlement, that means spending half the day crammed into a soot-stained dome, poking embers while praying you don't accidentally invent carbon monoxide poisoning. You trudge toward the round stone oven behind the longhouse, already glowing faintly in the morning haze. Smoke seeps from its crooked chimney like an omen. You duck your head inside to check the fire. Yep, still alive. Barely. You mutter a curse at yesterday's lazy apprentice and reach for your fire iron. Baking in Viking times wasn't a gentle pastime. It was war, with fire, flour, and physics. Your job is to stoke the flames evenly, so the baker can slide flatbreads and loaves in at the perfect temperature. Too hot, and everything scorches. Too cool, and it comes out like damp moss. The oven is clay-lined, soot-blackened, and radiates heat like the wrath of Thor. You crouch in front, feeding it logs, peat, and sometimes dried dung. Yes, dung. Dried animal droppings made excellent fuel. They also made your clothes smell like a sad barn. You watch the flames. You listen. The best fire stokers can hear when the oven is ready. It's not about temperature. It's about tone. The fire crackles differently. You learn to feel it through your knees. Some households baked once a week, but large settlements ran communal ovens daily. That's where you come in. You're the unsung hero behind the baker. You're also the one who gets blamed when the crust comes out like charcoal armor. Today, the baker is grumpy. He says yesterday's barley cakes were underbaked. You inform him the logs were wet. He grunts. You both grunt. This is your friendship language. You add a handful of twigs, fan the flames, and duck as a cloud of smoke billows into your face. You cough until your ribs protest. Historians still debate just how central bread was to Viking diets. Some argue barley and rye loaves were common. Others think porridge was more dominant. But one thing's clear. When there was bread, someone had to risk their eyebrows for it. You tend the fire while the baker prepares dough, simple mixes of barley, sometimes oats, kneaded with water and flattened by hand. No yeast, just skill, patience, and the occasional sour muttering. The first loaf goes in. You close the oven mouth with a flat stone. You crouch. You wait. Your knees scream. One quirky tradition. Some communities believed a cracked loaf meant bad luck. So if one came out split, it was quietly fed to pigs. You once rescued such a loaf and ate it yourself. You were sick for 2 days. The pigs were right. You peek into the oven, golden brown, slightly smoking. Success. You remove the loaves with a paddle, lay them on cooling racks, which are really just upside-down crates, and reload the fire. You do this again and again, all morning. The baker tosses you a heel of fresh bread, still warm, fragrant, a little gritty from the stone floor. You savor it slowly, despite the ash on your fingers. There's a peace to this job, buried beneath the smoke and sweat. You control the heat. You set the pace. You feed a village with nothing but wood and timing. And when someone tears into a loaf at supper and says, "Perfect crust," you don't say a word. You just smile and go wash your face. Again. Your lungs still ache from the oven smoke, and your tunic smells like burnt porridge and wet wood. You think, surely Surely the next job will be easier. It is not, because today you're crouched beside a nobleman with a pair of tweezers made from whalebone and the intense concentration of a falcon. You are the hair plucker of the Earl. Yes, this is real. And yes, he's expecting results. Vikings weren't the wild, unkempt barbarians pop culture likes to imagine. They had combs, razors, and tweezers, and they used them. Cleanliness was a mark of pride, grooming showed status, and for high-ranking men, having a well-shaped beard and a smooth brow wasn't vanity, it was politics. Which brings you here, kneeling beside Earl Bjornulfr, who is scowling at a copper mirror and muttering, "It's growing back already, isn't it?" You nod sympathetically. You're about to attack his unibrow. You start slow, one hair at a time, carefully, gently, respectfully. Ow. He growls. "Apologies, Lord," you whisper. You pluck again. Ow. You've done this dozens of times, from earls and warriors to their wives and sons, plucking eyebrows, neck hairs, ear fuzz. You've even been asked to tidy beard lines using nothing but tiny knives and trembling faith. One wrong stroke and you'll find your nose in a stew pot. Some people believe that removing certain hairs improves strength in battle. Others say it keeps lice away. More likely, either way, you're expected to deliver smooth, symmetrical, heroic foreheads, especially before feast days or weddings. You reach for a bit of beeswax to soothe his red skin. "Too much?" you ask. He grunts, which is Viking for yes, but I'll deny it. One fringe theory suggests Viking earls may have adopted certain grooming customs from contact with southern cultures, Frankish, Byzantine, or even Islamic merchants. Historians still argue if those silky grooming kits found in Norse graves were imported luxuries or simply fancy local craft. All you know is, these tweezers are sharp and the client is grumpy. You've plucked brows, but also hairlines. Some clients want a dramatic widow's peak to look more wolfish. One man insisted you carve his beard into lightning bolts. You did it. It looked awful. He loved it. There are fringe cases too. Literally, today, Earl Bjornulfr also wants the little hairs above his cheekbones cleaned up. You oblige, resisting the urge to suggest he just dunk his face in the fjord and let nature do the work. You move to his ears. They twitch. You flinch. You've had ears slapped, elbows bumped, and once a full headbutt from a warrior who sneezed mid-pluck. Occupational hazard. Despite all this, there's a strange intimacy to the job. People let their guard down when you're working that close. They tell secrets. They complain. They boast. You listen. And sometimes, you remember. You once overheard a jarl confess to hiding gold under his pigsty. You still haven't decided what to do with that information. You finish with a gentle dusting of ash to close the pores. Bjornulfr checks the mirror, nods once, and flips you a silver coin. "Smooth as a seal's belly," he says. You take it as a compliment. You bow. You exhale. Later, back in your hut, you clean your tools and whisper a prayer to Air, goddess of healing. You don't want your next client to get a rash. Again, being a warrior gets glory, but being the person who makes warriors look like warriors, that's an art, and a plucky one, at that. Your fingers are still tingling from that last unibrow emergency, but there's no time to rest. A new day, a new job. This one smells less like beeswax and more like pig. Today, you are the pig herd minder, which sounds adorable, until you're chest deep in mud, chasing a shrieking piglet through a thistle patch with your boots stuck and your dignity long gone. You wake before dawn, always. Pigs are early risers, and noisy ones. Your herd, 30 or so hairy, grunting, half-wild beasts, are already squealing for breakfast. You grab your feeding bucket and start your routine. Viking pigs weren't like the pink cartoon creatures on today's lunchboxes. These were rugged animals, short-legged, bristly, sharp-tusked, and smart enough to open gates or push you into a puddle just for fun. Think less Wilbur and more warthog with an attitude. Your job is to feed, guide, and not lose them. You whistle sharply. They know your voice. Sort of. The biggest sow, Helga, glares at you. She's in charge, and you know better than to challenge her. Last time someone tried, they ended up with a broken toe and a lifelong fear of grunting sounds. You lead the herd into the woods for foraging. Pigs are natural truffle hunters, though no one here knows what a truffle is. Instead, they root for mushrooms, nuts, and beetles. They clear the underbrush. They poop a lot, and occasionally they get into fights with each other, with wild dogs, with trees. You carry a long stick. It's not for hitting, it's for steering, and for whacking trees to scare off the aforementioned dogs, or wolves, or, once, a very territorial goose. Historians believe pigs were a cornerstone of Viking rural life. Easy to feed, quick to grow, and full of useful parts: meat, fat, hide, and bone. Some towns even paid taxes in bacon, which means your job is basically guarding a walking treasure hoard of pork. Of course, there's little glamour in being the swine whisperer. People nod politely when they see you, then hold their noses after you pass. You're not exactly perfumed, but when winter comes and there's salted pork on every table, you are the unseen hero. One quirky tidbit: Viking sagas often describe pigs as symbols of fertility, prosperity, or even war. The god Freyr famously rode a golden boar. Your pigs? Not golden, but they do sparkle after a good rain. By mid-morning, you've rescued 3 piglets from a thorn bush, stopped Helga from chewing on a boot, and lost your lunch to a particularly aggressive runt named Gorm. You're hungry, you're muddy, and your socks are squelching. You take a break on a tree stump, watching the herd snort contentedly through the undergrowth. There's a strange peace to it. The rhythm of snuffling, the soft crunch of hooves, the occasional squeal of sibling rivalry. It's chaotic, yes, but oddly meditative, until Gorm climbs into your lap. You sigh. He grunts. You scratch behind his ear. He snorts and promptly falls asleep on your leg. Later, you'll lead the herd back to their pen, toss fresh straw into their shelter, and do a final head count. You always count twice. Once, a pig slipped out, wandered into the blacksmith shop, and ate half a shoe. The sun sets as you finish mucking out their pen. You're covered in filth, your boots are ruined, but your pigs are happy and full. That counts for something. You close the gate behind you. Another successful day with no lost pigs, no major bites, and only 1 boot casualty. A miracle, really. You might not wield a sword, but you wield order in a world of chaos. And 30 very loud, very stubborn pigs know your name. The pigs are snoring. Your stick is splintered, and your boots are more mud than leather. So when someone taps you on the shoulder and offers a quieter job by the fjord, you don't ask questions. You just say yes. Because today, you're the salt boiler by the fjord. You make salt by hand from seawater, and it is every bit as slow, soggy, and sneeze-inducing as it sounds. You walk to the shore carrying your gear, wooden buckets, a wide shallow pan made of iron, and a crooked paddle. The sea is calm. Mist clings to the horizon. Gulls scream like they've lost their tax returns. Viking settlements near the coast needed salt for food preservation, tanning leather, seasoning bland porridge, and cleaning wounds. Salt was life, and it didn't come easy. It came through boiling ocean water until only crystals remained, a process that could take hours or even days. You fill your buckets at the shoreline. Then, carefully, you pour them into the pan, set atop a low stone hearth. You light the fire, not too hot, just steady enough to coax the water away. You stir gently, the wind shifts, and suddenly, your sinuses are on fire. Salt steam is a menace. It curls into your nose, dries your lips, and settles in your throat like powdered thunder. You cough, gag, and swear. Standard procedure. You hunch by the pan, watching water hiss and evaporate. The trick is to boil it just right, too fast, and you waste fuel, too slow, and you'll be here until the moon rises. You're aiming for that perfect ghostly fog of sea vapor and the slow reveal of glistening salt crystals on the pan's edge. One fringe theory suggests Vikings also used sun evaporation for salt. But let's be honest, this is Scandinavia. Sun? Evaporation? Good joke. Back to boiling. You sneeze again. You stir. You add more seawater. You sneeze. The hours pass. Your clothes stiffen from salt residue. Your hands are tacky. Even your eyebrows feel crunchy. And yet, there's something mesmerizing about watching the pan transform water into brine, brine into crystals, crystals into treasure. You scrape the first flakes gently into a bowl. They shimmer, pale, dry, flaky. You taste a pinch, sharp and pure, like the ocean distilled into a grain. Historians have found salt-making setups in Viking-era archaeological sites. Simple, low-tech, but effective. It's likely that certain households or coastal specialists were responsible for the bulk of production, especially during the summer months when drying was easier and people had the patience for smoke and brine. You hear footsteps. A fisherman appears, holding a bundle of fish wrapped in reeds. "Need to pack these for market," he says. You nod and hand over a bowl. Payment? A smoked trout and a muttered thanks. You tuck the fish into your tunic like a reward badge. You return to your fire. It's getting dark. Your back aches. But the pan is nearly empty now, just a glittering crust across the bottom. You scrape it gently, pile it into cloth sacks, and douse the coals. You smell like fish soup and sauna sweat. You are saltier than a drunken scald on a losing streak. But your work is gold, grainy, crunchy gold. As you walk back up the hill, sack slung over your shoulder, you imagine winter meals flavored with your flakes, salted meat, salted herring, maybe even that weird pickled turnip stew. And somewhere, someone will bite into it and say, "Just right." They'll never know your name, but their soup will be amazing. You've boiled the ocean dry, more or less, and your eyebrows are basically pickled. But before you can even rinse the salt crust from your tunic, you're handed a goose, a live goose. Congratulations. You're now the goose feather tax collector. It's not the worst job, honestly. You're not plunging into latrines or shouting laws into the wind, but it's definitely fluffy and mildly humiliating. In many Viking settlements, taxes and rents weren't always paid in silver or grain. Sometimes, they came in the form of goose-down, a warm, soft, and highly valuable resource, perfect for bedding, cloaks, or stuffing into the winter tunics of rich people who've never met their own pigs. You're the middleman between the goose and the government. You arrive at the first farmstead on your list. The matron of the house hands you a cloth sack and a deeply judgmental goose. You nod respectfully and retreat to a stool behind the shed. Time to begin the harvest. Harvesting feathers is tricky. You're not plucking the goose bald, just collecting the soft down beneath the outer feathers. This is done gently, carefully, and ideally without being pecked to death. You hum softly as you work. The goose hisses. Standard interaction, one by one. You work your way through the village's flock contributions. Some families bring bags of shed down, already gathered. Others, they point you toward their geese and wish you luck. One boy throws breadcrumbs at the birds and yells, "Good luck, featherman!" You mutter something about cursed children. The down itself is precious, light, insulative, and shockingly flammable. You once saw a feather-filled mattress catch fire from a single candle. The result was both tragic and oddly majestic, like watching a flaming cloud of betrayal. Historians note that feather goods were common luxury items in wealthier Viking households. Goose down, swan down, even eider duck feathers were bartered, gifted, and hoarded. Some sagas mention elaborately stuffed cloaks that rivaled royal robes. Your job ensures that supply keeps flowing. As the day progresses, your sack grows fluffier. Your face, however, does not. Goose dander gets into your nose, your mouth, your soul. You sneeze more times than a salt boiler in a pepper storm. There's also the matter of disputes. You arrive at one household to find a man insisting his feathers are from geese, while his neighbor swears they're just chicken fluff, dyed with charcoal. You weigh the sample, smell it, squint dramatically, then declare it suspiciously light. The feathers are confiscated. The man yells. The goose honks. You walk away. By afternoon, you've collected enough down to stuff 3 cloaks, 2 pillows, and possibly a very overconfident sleeping bag. You return to the tax tent, hand over your sacks, and receive your payment, a boiled egg and a knitted pouch. You don't ask what's in the pouch, you just nod. One fringe theory claims that feather collectors were sometimes accused of witchcraft, soft objects being suspicious in hard times. You don't doubt it. After all, your current outfit, downy, dusty, and covered in angry bite marks, makes you look like a very tired bird who lost a bar fight. You take a moment to sit on a hay bale, shake the feathers from your cloak, and wonder if you'll ever be able to exhale without expelling fluff. Probably not. Still, there's something oddly satisfying about this work. You don't wield a sword, you don't chant spells, but come winter, when the longhouse is wrapped in goose-down quilts and nobody freezes in their sleep, your contribution is undeniable. Warmth isn't just comfort, it's survival, and you made it happen, one sneezy, squirming goose at a time. You've had your fill of feathers, you're still sneezing into your elbow, and your tunic now rustles when you move. So when a longship captain waves you over with an urgent look and a fistful of silver, you know, it's your lucky day. Or maybe not, because today, you're the trading ship translator, and if you think that sounds glamorous, exotic ports, thrilling conversations, dramatic hand gestures, Let me adjust your expectations. First of all, you don't sail the seas. You're not the captain. You're the interpreter. You're the guy who speaks just enough Latin to understand the merchant from Francia and just enough Greek to know when someone's insulting your mother. Today's assignment takes you to the dock, where a foreign ship just arrived, sails furled, hull creaking, and crew shouting in a language you don't fully understand, but can fake well enough to keep the peace. You stand between the captain of the Viking vessel, a barrel-chested man who thinks every language can be mastered by yelling louder, and a Byzantine merchant with a collection of rings and a permanent frown. Your job? Translate. Tell him we want 30 bolts of silk, the Viking says. You nod, turn to the merchant, and say in your best, slightly improvised Greek, the tall one would like to trade for cloth, not bad cloth, fancy cloth, wife impressin' cloth. The merchant squints. Does he have amber? You glance at the Viking's cargo. Amber? Yes, plus a questionable collection of wolf pelts and 1 jar of pickled something. He has amber, you reply, then add, and something that smells like disappointment. The merchant nods. The deal begins. Being a translator in the Viking world wasn't just about language, it was about culture. You had to know customs, gestures, taboos. For example, don't hand someone a gift with your left hand. Don't point with your foot. And don't, under any circumstances, refer to someone's beard as fluffy. You learned that one the hard way. Historians believe many Vikings picked up bits of foreign languages during raids, trades, or time spent abroad as mercenaries. The Varangian Guard in Constantinople, full of Norsemen who eventually started throwing around Greek like it was just another dialect of shouting. You, though, are a local talent, raised near the harbor, exposed to travelers, taught Latin by a bored monk. You once bartered a single translated phrase for an entire sack of figs. You never even liked figs. There's debate among scholars whether Viking translators were ever considered sacred, or at least protected during negotiations. After all, if you kill the guy who knows both sides' demands, the trade falls apart. You like to think it grants you some immunity, just in case things go sideways. Back at the docks, the merchant offers salt and wine in exchange for the pelts. The Viking captain frowns. Ask him if he has glass, the green kind, with swirls. You ask. The merchant gestures toward a crate. You inspect it. Inside is a collection of wavy glass beads, fragile as snail shells and twice as pretty. You whistle. These could make a chieftain's daughter swoon. You return to negotiations, tossing out phrases in 3 languages and pantomiming the rest. Eventually, there's a handshake, a coin toss, and some aggressive nodding. Success. As the crews begin unloading and reloading, you sit on a crate and rub your temples. Your brain feels like it's been kneaded by a baker with a grudge, but the trade is done. Everyone's happy. Or at least, not openly angry. One sailor hands you a piece of foreign fruit, soft, yellow, and confusing. You take a bite. It's terrible. You nod gratefully anyway. There's no glory in this job, no songs. But without you, the silk doesn't come, the beads don't shine, and the wine stays in someone else's harbor. You speak the words. You build the bridges. You carry the meaning when no one else can, and you do it without ever raising your voice. Mostly. Your brain still hums from switching between 3 languages and inventing a 4th mid-negotiation. You were hoping for a quiet task, maybe something involving sitting, maybe even a nap. Instead, you're handed a bundle of herbs, a dead frog, and a bowl made of antler. You sigh, because today, you're the love spell mixer. Don't worry, it's not as romantic as it sounds. Actually, it's mostly grinding roots, muttering half-remembered chants, and desperately hoping no one drinks the wrong potion and proposes to their cousin. In Viking society, love was serious business, marriage alliances, dowries, and bloodlines all tangled together. But desire, passion, secret yearnings for the blacksmith's daughter or the thrall with suspiciously good cheekbones, that's where people turn to you. You light a small fire outside your hut. The smoke is meant to cleanse the spirits, though really, it just keeps the mosquitoes away. You open your ingredient pouch, dried rowan bark, fennel seeds, crushed amber, and something that may or may not be dried eel. Your client, a nervous farm boy clutching a chicken as payment, wants someone to notice him. You begin the ritual. Not all Viking love magic involved herbs and whispers. Some spells were carved into sticks, runes of attraction, others chanted during bathing, or etched into combs and worn like charms. You've tried it all. Some of it even works. One woman swore that after using your dream ink draft, her beloved showed up the next morning at her door. Historians still argue whether that counts as magic or just very effective stalking. You grind the herbs with a bone pestle, add a splash of mead, and mutter the old verse, "May their eyes seek yours, like bees seek the bloom, like wolves seek the moon, like socks seek the lost shoe." Poetry is not your strong suit. You hand the farm boy a vial and tell him to dab it behind his ears. He looks skeptical. You look even more skeptical. But with authority, he nods, leaves the chicken, and scurries away. Your next client arrives with a different request. Break a love spell. Her husband, apparently, has been overly affectionate since eating a suspicious pie. You brew her a countercharm with yarrow, vinegar, and an insult written backwards on a birch leaf. Every potion is a gamble. Some people end up genuinely in love. Others just get rashes. Once, you accidentally created something that made the entire village's pigs follow one man for 3 days. He didn't mind. Love spell mixing isn't just folklore. It's a form of power. In a world where most people's fates were dictated by birth or blade, changing someone's heart, even briefly, felt like real control. That's why people came to you with their hopes, their fears, and the occasional bag of questionable mushrooms. You keep records, sort of, scratch symbols on driftwood, notes carved into old bones. Your system is not, let's say, scientific, but it's yours, and it mostly works. As the sun dips, you finish your final brew of the day, a fertility charm made from moss, honey, and a dash of powdered fish scale. You cap the bottle, tie it with string, and label it with a heart and a frown. You know better than to get people's hopes too high. You sit outside your hut, watching the mist creep in from the fjord, sipping a cup of nettle tea. The chicken clucks behind you. You pet it. You sigh. You're not a god, not even a priestess, but you give people hope, and that might be the strongest magic of all, even if it occasionally smells like wet parsley and regret. You wipe nettle dust from your hands and wave goodbye to the love-struck farm boy who may or may not be about to embarrass himself in public. As you turn back toward your hut, someone runs up yelling something about a disaster on the docks. You don't ask questions anymore. You grab your rope knife and sprint, because today you are the rope untangler. Yes, that is a job, a very important one. In fact, because without you, sails don't raise, cargo doesn't unload, and sometimes people get dragged into the sea by accident. You arrive at the harbor to find chaos, a longship rocking gently in the tide, every single one of its mooring lines twisted together like a drunken spider's web, ropes over ropes, knots on knots, one loop running through a chicken crate, and someone yelling, "It wasn't like this yesterday." You sigh, you crack your knuckles, you go to work. Ropes in the Viking world weren't just string, they were lifelines, made from twisted hemp, animal sinew, horsehair, or even seaweed in a pinch. They had to be flexible, strong, and well maintained. And because Viking sailors loved rigging complicated systems of sail control and cargo harnesses, knots happened constantly. And when knots happened, you happened. You start by assessing the mess. It's not just tangled, it's haunted. There's one loop inside another, tied in what looks like a triple hitch sailor's regret formation. A younger sailor tries to help. You gently but firmly hand him a fish and send him away. You need focus. You work slowly, breathing evenly. Tug here, loosen there. Feed this loop back through that knot. It's like solving a puzzle that also gives you rope burn. And you will get rope burn. You find a knot so tight it's practically fossilized. You reach for your bone pick, gently pry it open, and mutter calming phrases like, "You miserable twisted worm string," under your breath. Some knots are intentional, like the nut carrying, a binding knot used to secure sails. Others, accidents, like the legendary thrice-cursed fishhook hitch you once found on a merchant's barge. No one ever confessed. Historians still debate whether Vikings had a formal system of knot tying. Some think their methods were passed down orally. Others believe certain coastal villages developed signature styles. You've seen it all: wide loops in Denmark, heavy braids in Sweden, and that one fisherman in Norway who insists on bow knots for everything. There's artistry in untangling. You don't just pull randomly. You read the tension. You feel the give. You find the mother knot, the place where all chaos begins, and unravel it with the precision of a surgeon who occasionally swears at seagulls. After 2 hours, the ropes are finally separated, straight, organized, functional. You coil them neatly and hang them on pegs, labeled with carved runes: sail, dock, haul, and do not touch unless you're me. The captain appears, grins broadly, and hands you a chunk of dried fish and a new rope knife. You nod, deeply satisfied. There's no applause, just quiet competence, and a total absence of knots. You head home with your hands aching, and your brain pleasantly blank. There's something oddly meditative about rope work. In a world full of blood feuds and boiling cauldrons, you bring order. You straighten what others have mangled. You make the ships go. And sure, no one writes songs about the rope guy. But when the sail lifts smooth and the cargo swings into place without strangling a crewman, that's your legacy. Tidy, secure, untangled. The ropes are untangled. The ship sails off without a hitch, literally. And you finally think, just maybe, you can take a break. But then the village priestess finds you. "You're needed," she says. Dream work. You sigh and reach for your goat-hide journal. Because today, you're the Odin's dream interpreter. In a world where gods whisper in the wind and fate is as real as frostbite, Dreams aren't just dreams, they're messages, warnings, promises, and someone has to translate the riddles. That someone is you. You don't wear robes or chant in Latin. Your tools are simpler: a charcoal stick, a polished stone for scrying, and a mind trained to find meaning in the absurd. You've spent years learning the old symbols. Wolves mean danger. Ravens mean knowledge. Fish, well, fish can mean a lot of things. Depends on the fish. Today's client is a local blacksmith. Tough man, big beard, terrified of his own subconscious. He hasn't slept properly in a week. I keep dreaming about rain inside my longhouse, he says, wringing his hands, and a chicken. But the chicken is glowing. You nod, thoughtfully. You've heard weirder. You ask clarifying questions. Was the rain warm or cold? Was the chicken angry or just glowing? Did it speak? He says no. Just glowed and maybe danced. You scribble notes. Dream interpretation in Viking culture wasn't superstition. It was respected. Kings had dream readers. Warriors consulted seers before battle. Whole sagas hinged on a single premonition. Odin himself was known to send messages in dreams, sometimes gentle, sometimes not. Historians still debate whether dream interpreters held formal positions or were more like freelance wisdom dealers. Either way, when someone wakes up screaming about flying axes or bleeding trees, you get called. You close your eyes. Let your mind drift. The blacksmith waits. Rain inside the home, you murmur, means emotion, something unsaid, unshed, a heaviness. He nods, slowly. And the glowing chicken? You pause. That's new, but light in a dream often means clarity or guilt. He stiffens. I did steal that goose egg last week. You don't judge. You just make a note. Guilt manifested as poultry. You give him a calming charm, an iron ring etched with protective runes. You tell him to place it under his pillow, eat no onions before bed, and apologize to the chicken if he sees it again. He leaves, relieved. Your next dreamer is a child. I was running, but my legs were mud, she says, and I had no mouth. Classic. You comfort her. Explain that dreams about stuck movement often come during times of change. She's growing. Learning the no mouth part? Maybe someone's not listening to her. You promise she's safe. You give her a carved stone shaped like a tongue. She smiles. Some days, your work feels like poetry. Other days, it feels like deciphering riddles written by drunk gods with a flair for drama. One fringe theory says dream workers were trained through fasting and sleep deprivation. You believe it. You once stayed awake for 3 days interpreting dreams for a chieftain's wedding guests. You hallucinated a talking elk. The elk gave you surprisingly good advice. You finish your last session just as the sun sets. Someone dreamed of their teeth falling out while swimming in mead. You said it meant prosperity, but at a cost. They seemed satisfied. You return to your hut, light a small oil lamp, and record your notes. The dreams of the village are now part of your archive, a tangle of symbols, feelings, and half-remembered gods. You may not change fates, but you read them. In the hush of night, when the fire dies and the breath slows, you are the bridge between waking and wonder. And if Odin himself ever visits someone's dream, you'll be ready with your stick, your stone, and a theory about glowing chickens. The night winds down with dreams recorded and runes tucked safely under pillows, but your rest is short-lived because the war bands just returned, and the battlefield spoils are piling up in the worst way. So much for sleep. Today, you're the battlefield loot organizer. It's less glorious than it sounds. While the warriors limp home with blood on their cloaks, and songs already brewing about their unmatched valor, you are the one left to sort through the aftermath. You, a cart, and a rapidly fraying sense of smell. You arrive at the makeshift sorting yard behind the longhouse, where bundles of loot, armor, weapons, clothing, coins, food, questionable jewelry, and the occasional shoe, with a foot still in it, are dumped into piles. The warriors cheer, drink, and walk away. You stare at the heap. It stares back. Loot was essential to Viking warfare. It wasn't just about glory, it was about profit. Every raid, skirmish, or feud ended with spoils, and those spoils had to be accounted for. Some went to the chieftain, some to the crew, and some, like the two-headed axe with a cracked handle, went straight into the fix or melt pile. You pick through the items one by one. A dented helmet, usable. A torn silk tunic, surprisingly nice. A silver bracelet shaped like a serpent, definitely cursed. You tag that one with a carved stick and set it aside. Then there are the boots. Always the boots. Some unmatched. Some still sticky. You try not to think too hard. You whistle for the village dog. It sniffs and refuses to get closer. You understand. You record each item with tally marks on a wooden tablet. It's not glamorous, but it's necessary. Without organization, arguments break out. He took 2 cloaks. That's my goblet. You already got the priest's goat. You prevent feuds before they start. Your peacekeeping in wool gloves. Historians often overlook the post-battle economy, but some records hint that roles like yours existed in larger raiding parties. Some even suggest loot organizers developed a reputation for honesty, trusted to ensure fair division and detect accidental hoarding. Whether you live up to that reputation is up to you. Today, you catch someone trying to hide a ruby ring in their sock. You raise an eyebrow. He shrugs. You confiscate the sock. You sort by category: metal, cloth, edible, dubious. You create subpiles for trade goods, ritual objects, and possibly haunted. You once had to deal with a wooden idol no one wanted to touch. It ended up in the goat shed. The goats haven't been the same since. There's one pile of letters, personal messages, prayers, or scribbled inventory lists from the enemy's pockets. You don't read them, usually, but one falls open, a drawing from a child. You fold it gently, place it with the valuables, and say nothing. Among the loot is a single shoe, handcrafted fine leather, stitched with gold thread. Its pair is nowhere to be found. You briefly consider trying it on. Then you remember what happened last time and resist. You rinse items when necessary, boil cloth and lye, scrape blood off hilts. You once spent 2 hours trying to clean someone's lucky spoon. No one's sure if it ever stops smelling like onions. As the sun sets, your piles are neat, labeled, cataloged. The chieftain arrives and surveys your work. He grunts with approval. You hand him a pouch of items marked leadership share. He tosses you a small coin. It smells like rust and respect. You sit back on your crate and stretch your aching back. You've handled death today, but also continuity. The spoils you sorted will become new tunics, gifts, tools, and tales. They'll be woven into the village's next chapter. No one sings songs about the loot organizer, but without you, nothing gets built, repaired, or remembered. And that, in its own quiet way, is legacy. The last pile is sorted, the tunics folded, the spears racked, the haunted jewelry respectfully buried near the turnip patch. You stretch your arms, dust off your cloak, and prepare to go home. Again, when someone taps your shoulder. Another job? Of course. Tonight, you are the funeral smoke supervisor. You knew this one would come eventually. After all, someone always dies after a raid. And tonight, the village gathers by the water, torches flickering, to send one of their own to the next world. Your job? Make sure the pyre burns just right, not too fast, not too slow, not too smoky, not too damp, and, most importantly, upward. You arrive at the beach where the ship burial is ready. The deceased laid out on planks surrounded by their weapons, cloaks, and a generous pile of salted fish. A priestess chants, mourners murmur. And you? You're elbow deep in bundles of kindling, herbs, and pitch-soaked wood, adjusting everything like it's your personal fireplace and not the vessel of someone's eternal legacy. In Viking belief, the smoke of a funeral pyre carries the soul skyward, toward Valhalla, hell, or some other mysterious afterlife destination that may or may not depend on how many enemies you decapitated. If the smoke rises clean and straight, it's a good sign. If it swirls or sputters, people notice. You arrange the firewood with practiced hands. You know which branches crackle too loud, which ones give off dark smoke, which resins pop too much and could accidentally ignite a mourner's sleeve. You sprinkle dried juniper and sweet flag across the platform. The smell isn't just for ceremony, it masks the more unpleasant aromas to come. One of the warriors nudges you. Do we light it yet? Not until the wind shifts. You mutter, watching the clouds. Historians still argue how consistent Viking funeral rites were, whether every village had strict customs or just did their best with what they had and hoped Odin wasn't picky. But what's certain is that these rituals mattered. They gave meaning, closure, a send-off with fire, song, and the smell of pine smoke in your nose for days. Finally, the wind calms. You nod. The torch is handed over. The fire touches the edge of the pyre. A hiss, then a roar. You step back. The flames rise steadily, licking at the sky. The smoke, light gray, clean, rises in a perfect column. A collective breath from the crowd. You did it. No errant sparks. No embarrassing sideways belch of black fog. Just clean ascension. You stand beside the pyre, monitoring everything as the flames take hold. You adjust logs when necessary, shield the wind, keep the burn balanced. A boy tries to throw in a stick for fun. You give him a look. He runs away. As the ship crackles and groans, someone begins a soft chant. Others join in. The rhythm builds, swells, then fades again. The fire pops, bright against the twilight. There's a moment where you look up, watch the smoke rise, and feel calm. You've done your job, not just tonight, but through all of it. Through scraping latrines and stirring tar, through love spells and battle loot, pigs and poetry, bread ovens and dream omens. You've worked behind the scenes of Viking life, dirty, loud, smoky, ridiculous, and made it run. No sagas mention you by name, but none of them happen without you. The flames begin to fade, the last embers settle into a soft, glowing red. The crowd disperses, speaking in low voices, footsteps muffled by sand and ash. You stay a little longer, alone now, gently stirring the fire with a stick, helping it rest. The stars emerge, quiet and steady, Above the fjord's black mirror, the wind has died completely. The sea laps gently at the shore, rhythmically, like breath. You sit beside what's left of the pyre, rubbing warm ash between your fingers, not grimy, just soft, earthy, final. You close your eyes. The work is done. There's no more shouting, no feathers up your nose, no bristling pigs or chanting runes. Just silence, and the gentle hum of memory, of strange jobs and stranger days, of steaming buckets and glowing chickens, of good fires and bad smells, and the small, quiet satisfaction of making a world go round in ways no one notices until they stop working. You rest your head against a rock, just for a moment. The heat of the fire still lingers in the ground beneath you, like an old friend pressing close. You exhale slowly. Your shoulders soften. Your thoughts begin to drift. You think, for a flicker of a second, that you see smoke still rising into the night sky. But no, it's only a cloud, passing gently across the stars. Sleep takes you, like a tide, steady and slow, and that's it. Another day in the life you didn't expect. But somehow, one you wouldn't trade. End of script. Sweet dreams.